Barry Coates.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker.
Tēnā koe.
Mr. Speaker, we've seen the great response of citizens, iwi, and our communities in supporting each other through this crisis. But yesterday, at a time when our fellow citizens were recovering from this massive earthquake, Parliament was engaged in passing legislation. And yesterday, we saw the last chapter in the long, sad story of the failed Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, the TPPA. New Zealand has been perhaps the first and possibly the only country to ratify an agreement which now will probably never come into force. There is no possibility of it being signed in the United States before the presidential election, and very little possibility under a new President Trump that it will be signed after the election. And a lot of people are saying that it's because of the election of Donald Trump that the TPPA has failed. And I think that's to misread the situation. Actually, the demise of the TPPA started 7 years ago, in a period when negotiations were undertaken in extreme secrecy apart from corporate advisors who influenced the delegates in supporting their proposal. And the TPP has been what we call a Trojan horse agreement, the kind of agreement which has apparently trade benefits is its visible sign, but it includes elements in it that are profoundly dangerous for our society. We've seen a major movement rise up against the TPPA agreement, not only in New Zealand, but internationally across the 12 countries negotiating the TPPA. We've seen fantastic work done by doctors in analysing the way it would undermine public health. Lawyers, including the Chief Justices of New Zealand and Australia, who have expressed deep concern over investor-state dispute settlement, which would allow foreign corporations to take cases above the government. We've seen local government mobilise, representing 60% of the New Zealand public, concerned about the way the TPPA will undermine local democracy. We've seen iwi representatives take a case to the Treaty of Waitangi, concerned that granting new rights to corporations will undermine their rights under the Treaty of Waitangi. We've seen those concerned about internet freedom recognise that there are privacy concerns when our data is held overseas with no local control. We've seen concerns from trade unions and workers about a race to the bottom in human rights and workers' rights in particular. We've seen concern about climate change. In 6,000 pages of the agreement, there is not a single mention of climate change, even though the TPPA can undermine action on climate change. We've seen concerns about environment. Two-thirds of the 696 cases have been about the environment taken under the investor-state dispute settlement. We've seen academics undertake research, peer-reviewed research, that has been necessary because the government has not undertaken the research. We've seen small business concerns about advantages being given to large foreign corporations rather than to protect small business. And we've seen action in Parliament where 7 years of the Green Party raising issues have been joined by concerns and a strong position also from Labour, New Zealand First and the Māori Party. In New Zealand, over 10,000 citizens, over 100,000 citizens signed petitions and many thousand marched in rallies, including 35,000 in Auckland on the 4th of February. This is part of a global movement. This is why the TPPA were defeated, and we don't want agreements like this to be resurrected. So we're calling for fundamental change, for transparency and accountability in the processes. We're talking about rules that benefit companies that trade, but not at the expense of small business and local economy, not at the expense of social inclusion and human rights, not at the expense of the environment, and in ways that will protect and support democracy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.